Fellas, the other day I did a community poll on some of the worst takes, or I asked you lot for some of the worst takes that I've ever said during my channel's history. Maybe it's just a prediction that aged really badly, or maybe it's something I said that has stuck with a lot of you lot because all you disagree. And by the way, some of them I will be, agreeing with you. I'll say that it's a bad take. I'll say that in hindsight it was a terrible take. And then in some of them, listen, I'm going to be defending myself. I'm going to be saying I still think this is a correct take, or if it's a prediction for a future fight, I'll still stand by that. So yeah, let's get into it with the first bad take that I've apparently got is saying Volkanovski would make light work of Topuria. It really didn't age well. Now, obviously, this is a prediction that didn't age well. At the time, I thought Volkanovski was the guy at the featherweight division, and you can't really blame me because he obviously lost to Islam Makhachev by decision, comes back against Yair Rodriguez and absolutely destroys him. And I thought the experience with Makhachev, it would be a really tough fight for Topuria when Topuria's best win at the time was Josh Emmett. And I thought the fact that Topuria hadn't even faced a Yair Rodriguez or an Allen or a Holloway or anything like that, I thought Volkanovski would be too much for him, which obviously wasn't the case because he got knocked out in the first round, second round even, but he got knocked out in the first round against Islam Makhachev, which obviously affected his performance against Topuria. In hindsight, it was a bad take, but I don't think picking Volkanovski was, an absolutely horrendous take at the time. I think Volkanovski, being the skilled guy he was, I still had hope for Volkanovski, but obviously didn't end up going down. So I guess that is a bad take in hindsight. The next one is me saying that the reason Jon Jones ain't fighting Tom Aspinall is because he would lose. I still stand by this. I think the reason that Jones ain't fighting Aspinall is because he knows he'd lose. Why wouldn't he? You get a super fight with the interim champion, an up-and-comer who pretty much everyone thinks is going to beat you. You go out there and beat Tom Aspinall. You're retiring as the greatest of all time, no question. You go out there and beat Stipe Miocic, who everyone thinks you're going to beat regardless, and then you retire. Everyone's going to be saying, what about Aspinall? You ducked Aspinall. You never fought Aspinall. Everyone knows you're going to beat Stipe. It's not even prime Stipe. It's a washed Stipe who's literally limping into arenas. So I still stand by the fact that Jones ain't fighting Aspinall because he knows that Tom Aspinall is tough competition. He knows he's too much for Jones, and he knows that there's a big threat that he loses to Aspinall. I still stand by that. That's the reason he's not fighting him. What possible reason would he not fight Tom Aspinall? He would gain 100 times more from beating Aspinall than he would from Stipe. So I still stand by that. I agree with myself there, and I don't think that's a bad take, and I think a lot of you lot probably agree with that as well, that Jon Jones ain't fighting Aspinall because he is, well, not necessarily scared, but he just knows he'd lose if he was to face Aspinall. So that's a take. The next take is saying Belal was light work for Burns. Now, I don't remember the specific time I said this. I weren't there at UFC 2. I didn't have a channel at UFC 288. I believe that fight was on, so I don't remember saying this, but if I did say it, I guess in hindsight it is a bad take. But I still thought that Burns, stylistically, was a difficult fight for Belal Muhammad. He'd fought so many top guys at the time. His striking was dangerous. He had good boxing, and obviously his jiu-jitsu is amazing, which can combat Belal Muhammad's wrestling pace. And obviously at the night it didn't go well, but that was partially due to Burns' injury. So I don't think that's a horrendous take. I think it's just a prediction that went wrong. The next one is me saying that boxing is dead and it aged like milk. Now, you got to remember, at the time I was saying this, it was after Francis Ngannou had just beaten Tyson Fury. And even though boxing isn't dead, I'll give you that. If I did say that, I disagree. It's not dead. It's definitely still not in the best position it's been. I know we're having fights like Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney, and we've been having big fights along these past few years, to be honest, for boxing have been great. But still, boxing in general isn't the best position it's in. We get about 5 big fights a year, and in comparison to MMA, and obviously I'm going to be biased to MMA, I watch MMA a lot more than boxing. I still think it's not in the best space it's been. So I don't think anything I said in that Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou video was completely out of pocket. Especially for the fact that Francis Ngannou, a guy who came from the UFC, made his boxing debut and arguably beat the heavyweight champion of the world. That's why I said it, I guess. But I guess boxing, yeah, it isn't dead, but it's definitely not in the best position it's been. And it's still a tricky situation with boxing. Saying 303 is going to be the best card of all time. This is a recent video, and I never said that UFC 303 is going to be the best card of all time. And if I did, let me rephrase myself. I'm saying that UFC 303 has potential to be one of the biggest cards of all time. You've got Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, Colby Covington, and Ian Gary all on the same card. Imagine the build-up for that card, the press conference. What made Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov so big was the build-up to it. And I'm not saying it's necessarily going to overtake that card or that fight, but you've got Conor McGregor, Colby Covington, and Ian Gary at one press conference. I mean, first of all, Gary versus Colby is one of the biggest rivalries in the history of the UFC. You're putting a lot of eyes on that rivalry by sticking it on a McGregor card. With Conor McGregor already has the main event bringing in all the pay-per-views, it has potential to be one of the biggest cards of all time. So I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be the best, and if I did say that, I want to rephrase it, but I still stand by the point that Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, if they do that card correctly and they add a big fight like Colby Covington versus Ian Garry, it has potential to be a massive fight. So I still kind of stand by that. The next one is you saying that Kayla Harrison will lose against Holly Holm because Harrison is too old. I think I did say that, and to be honest, that isn't a completely outrageous take considering Harrison's 33. But yeah, it's just a bad prediction. I'll take it on the chin. It was a terrible prediction, and that fight overall, I just thought that Holly Holm, when Kayla Harrison was coming to the UFC, should not necessarily be too much, but the fact that she'd been so experienced at the top level, I thought she'd be able to get it done in a decision. But yeah, I'll admit that was an outrageous take. I deserve to take that one on the chin and say that was a bad take. The next one is you saying Movsar Evloev is a tough fight for Ilia Topuria. Now, this should have been in the video that I did last week where I said toughest fights for every champion. I still stand by this. I think top 3 toughest fights for Ilia Topuria. You've got to give Evloev his credit. He might not be the most entertaining fighter. He might not be the fighter we want to fight for the belt in the featherweight division, but he's undefeated. He's on a win streak. He's coming off a win over, well, not the most impressive win, but he's coming off a win over Arnold Allen. He's got wins over guys like Diego Lopez as well. Movsar Evloev, I still think he's a tough fight for Topuria because of the grappling. And I know I'm not saying he necessarily beats Topuria. I do think Topuria would beat Evloev. But because Evloev got such a good grappling pace, he's never lost before. And it works for him in every fight. And the fact that Topuria hasn't really faced any grapplers on the level of Evloev. He's faced Bryce Mitchell. And he's obviously faced Ryan Hall, but none of those guys can even be compared to Evloev. So even though I think Topuria beats Evloev, I don't think that's necessarily an outrageous take. I think that's just, a disagreement that you've got there. The next one is most of your picks in your boring fighter ranked vid was bad. I don't think they were, to be honest. Maybe you disagree with the tiers, but personally, I don't think the list is necessarily outrageous. I think a lot of them deserve to be where they are. I think most of the people disagreeing are probably people that disagree with me putting Strickland in the list. And even though I don't think Strickland's one of the most boring in the UFC, I think he's heavily overrated for how exciting his style actually is. But yeah, again, I don't think the takes in that video were necessarily terrible. I mean, maybe you lot disagree. And then we've got, again, another John Jones one. Any of your takes regarding John Jones and Aspinall? Yeah, again, man, Aspinall's going to smoke Jones, and a lot of the Jones fans don't want to hear it. I'm sorry. I'd still think that Aspinall smokes John Jones. Say it's British bias, say whatever, but I still think that John Jones probably gets absolutely demolished by Tom Aspinall. And talking of Tom Aspinall, basically saying that I have talked about Tom Aspinall as if he's achieved more than he's already done, if that's what this comment is trying to say. I get what you're trying to say. I have said a lot about Tom Aspinall, and I'm very high on Tom Aspinall. Is it British bias? Partially, yes. He's one of my favourite in the UFC. I'm not going to deny that. But I've watched Aspinall a lot, and I do think he's got potential to be the greatest. I'm just talking about the potential that Tom Aspinall has. But even in the UFC, he's already achieved a lot. I mean, to do what he did to Alexander Volkov at UFC London, knocking out Marcin Tybura, and obviously knocking out Sergey Pavlovich on short notice when he had a back injury, and he's practically looked flawless in every fight in the UFC besides the one time when he got injured against Curtis Blades. I really do think Aspinall will retire as one of the greatest heavyweights, and I know we've not seen it yet. I still need to see more from him before I make claims like that, I guess, but I still don't think that's necessarily an outrageous take. So yeah, my take on Aspinall, say I glaze him, you can say what I want, it is British bias, but I just think he's one of the best fighters in the UFC right now, which is why he's in the pound for pound rankings without even ever winning an undisputed belt. Another prediction one, saying that Cejudo would beat Merab. Yeah, again, a lot of people disagreed with this. I just thought, again, in hindsight, Merab's facing a grappler like Henry Cejudo, who had never been really out-grappled to a high... I mean, he was out-grappled, I guess, by Aljo in the fight previous, but Cejudo, with the wrestling credibility that he's got before, the wrestling background, and the fact that he's been at the top level for the longest time before his layoff, I thought it'd be too much for the up-and-coming Merab. Obviously, in hindsight, again, terrible prediction, I'll admit it. That was a bad prediction, is what it is. Saying that Topuria versus Holloway is a 50-50 fight when Topuria has beaten Volkanovski and Volkanovski lost to Max Holloway. Now, this is a perfect example of MMA math. You can't use MMA math when predicting fights. You can't say that this guy beats this guy, so he's definitely going to beat this guy. Yeah, I still think Topuria versus Holloway is a 50-50 fight. You can't just go out there and say that Holloway gets destroyed by Topuria just because Topuria's beaten Volkanovski and Holloway hasn't. Styles make fights, we all know this. Styles make fights for a reason. If Styles didn't make fights, then Curtis Blades wouldn't be fighting Tom Aspinall because Blades has lost to Pavlovich and Pavlovich has lost to Aspinall. So yeah, you can't use MMA math. I still think the styles between Holloway, especially how he looks at UFC 300, is a really, really dangerous fight for Topuria. Likewise, Topuria's a dangerous fight for Holloway. It's a 50-50 fight. I still stand by that. It is a 50-50 fight between the two of them, and I don't think it's outrageous to say that. It's a 50-50 fight, so that's another take that I've got. So those are the bad takes that I'm reacting to. Let me know what your thoughts are on these takes. For some of them, I think I stand by what I said. I don't think they're outrageous takes. For some of them, I'll admit the prediction was wrong, or the take that I said was probably horrible at the time. But yeah, that's my prediction, not predictions, what I mean about that's my reaction to the bad takes on my channel. I'm sure there's going to be more bad takes to come, but yeah, that's my reaction to my apparent bad takes. Let me know what you think about them. Thank you for watching.